Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So I wanted to talk about this new children's book that has come out. It's targeted to all 7-year-olds and it's about British Black history. And it makes some bold claims based on a scientific study from the University College London. And one of the claims that is causing quite the debate is that Black people built Stonehenge. That's right. So the book was written by a Nigerian-born British author. She was born in Nigeria and she came to the UK as a child. And she has written this book, I guess, to encourage young Black children, to help them feel a sense of belonging in the UK, to help them feel that they are part of the history of the UK and that they help build the UK. One of the claims that is made is that Black people were in Britain 7,000 years before white people ever stepped foot on British soil, on the British Isles. That's one of the claims that is made. Now, I've looked at some of the excerpts, and of course, to make such claims, you would expect them to cite their sources. And, you know, based on what I've seen, I haven't seen many sources. And it kind of seems like it's based on how you interpret what it means to be a Black person. When you say that somebody is Black or white or Asian, you know, how do you categorize people as those races? Now, it seems that if somebody is slightly olive-skinned, it means they're Black, apparently. So let's get into the story. Readers of brilliant Black British history by the Nigerian-born British author, Atinuke, a Nigerian with one name, I just thought I'd point that out, are told the Neolithic monument in Wiltshire was built while Britain was a Black country. The book, which is aimed at children aged 7 and above, also tells readers that every single British person comes from a migrant and that the very first Britons were Black. Now, I do agree that Britain was diverse to begin with. The Anglo-Saxons, the Dukes, you know, the Celts, those were diverse tribes to begin with. So in that sense, yes. But I wouldn't say that included tribes from Africa. These were a diverse group of, you know, Europeans. The introduction adds that Britain has been mostly a white country for a lot less time than it has been mostly a Black country. Atinuke also claims that the remains of the 10,000-year-old Cheddar Man belong to someone who had skin as dark can be. And I believe that's based on the scientific experiment. A facial reconstruction of Cheddar Man depicted him as having dark skin in 2018. Although one expert involved in the project insisted that it was a probable profile rather than a certainty. Brilliant Black British history is published by Bloomsbury and promoted by literary charity The Book Trust, which itself is funded by the Arts Council. The book takes readers through an overview of the presence of Black people in Britain. It says that Britain was a Black country more than 7,000 years before white people came, and during that time, the most famous British monument was built, Stonehenge. But research published in 2019 suggested the Neolithic farmers who built Stonehenge had paler skin and were descended from populations originating in Anatolia, in what is now Turkey. So again, you can imagine that if there's any evidence of people having anything other than blonde hair, blue eyes, they were Black. And that's what we've seen when it comes to how people interpret the Bible, and they say that, you know, Jesus was a Black man. We've seen this before. They also likely had brown eyes and black or dark brown hair. Atinuke's book also features illustrations of Britain during various periods of its history. One page shows an image of a Black Roman legendary fighting a white Celt. So the author claims the Romans had turned back to Europe and pushed north after trying and failing to conquer the African kingdom of Nubia. By the Middle Ages, Britain was a hodgepodge of people, according to the author. The population was made of original British migrants, Celts, Romans, Britons, Anglo-Saxons, Vikings, Africans, and Normans. They also spoke a hodgepodge language too, English. A page on the Black Lives Matter movement says that although race does not scientifically exist, Black people suffer institutional racism. The book is billed in its blurb as an eye-opening history of Britain that focuses on a part of our past that has mostly been left out of history books, the brilliant black history of England, Scotland, Wales and Ireland. It adds, "Did you know that the first Britons were black? Or that some of the Roman soldiers who invaded and ruled Britain were black too?" Okay, so this is I notice on the website that promotes the book, they talk about Black Lives Matter, from science and sport to literature and law. Celebrate the brilliant black people who have helped build Britain. Learn about key and complex historical topics such as world wars, slavery, the Industrial Revolution, Windrush, and the Black Lives Matter movement. So they're classing the Black Lives Matter movement as a monumental part of British history in the same way as the Windrush was. They hold that movement in high esteem, clearly. That gives me the indication that this author is very leftist, probably adopts a lot of the Marxist communist ideologies that the Black Lives Matter movement adopts. And therefore, it's no surprise that when it comes to interpreting history, that means uplifting black people, even at the expense of truth. Just like, the video I did about Egyptians, when we talk about Hoteps, that had good intentions, but it was at the expense of truth. It was at the expense of true history. And I think that's what we're seeing here. British Hoteps, I didn't even know there was such a thing. British Hoteps saying the same thing. Where you see things that have been attributed to white people in the past, they've flipped it and said it's black people actually. It's black people who built this.
It occurred in his charter, and Bron means brown man, which means his people was dark-skinned people. That's who they was, man. The Anglo-Saxons was black.
This book is certainly not something that unites people. It's caused a lot of division. It's caused a lot of animosity between people of different races. And it's a matter of, if you don't believe this book, if you don't go along with this book, you're a racist. So you do have people who, I guess, are saying, let them have their book. That's how it comes across to me. The people that are okay with this, to me, it comes across as, let them have their book. If it makes them feel better, let them have it. And I don't think that's the right approach either. That's kind of patronizing. But, like I said, I don't think this book is strictly classed as a non-fiction book, as a historical document. This is what somebody has written to uplift people. I don't think you need to rewrite history to uplift people. There's plenty of rich culture that we can attribute to black people, that we can attribute to people from Africa, people from the Caribbean, African Americans. We don't need to rewrite history so that black people can feel they have a rich part of history that exists without having to rewrite history. So I'm inclined to believe that's what we're dealing with here when it comes to books like these. And we're going to see more and more of them. Marxist communist books that rewrite history, that interpret things in favor of leftist ideology. Now, there are some parts of history that we can never be 100% sure of. We can only look at the evidence. And it's funny that since 2020, there seems to be even more of a push to rewrite history. There seems to be more of a push to interpret history in a certain direction, to look at history through a certain lens. And it's very, very dangerous. I don't like it being pushed on children.
Is all about this idea of teaching truthful history, which is what they say they're doing when they're teaching critical race theory. And essentially what they mean when they say we're teaching the true history or accurate history is they're teaching a far left interpretation of history that's always coming through this bias of collective struggle, which is how they frame it. And so I just, anytime you see Black Lives Matter curriculum showing up in schools, anytime you see social justice curriculum or anti-racist education or any of that, people need to be aware that it all leads back to this far left political ideology. And this is Marxism. This is communism. And they're going to the schools because if they can get your kids early enough, they know that it's dang near impossible to change their minds later.
I've got it here. This is a new children's book aimed at 7-year-olds by the Nigerian-born author Atinuke. Within it, she boldly asserts that the UK was a black country for over 7,000 years before white people came along, adding that the prehistoric monument of Stonehenge in Wiltshire was built by black people. Scientists have been swift to pour cold water on the claims, with recent research stating that it's impossible to know the skin colour of our earliest inhabitants. The historian Dr. Zahir Masani said the book is typical of the kind of wokedom that's been colonising our schools. It's evidence of brainwashing children with outright lies, confusion and misinformation. So, Calvin Robinson, do you think books like this are indoctrinating kids into believing a false version of history? Have you had a... I mean,
I have
you guys have been reading it tonight.
It's massively hyperbolic. It's actually insane, the revisionist history that takes place in there. You know, blacks were here first, blacks built Stonehenge. It's like, you can say that we had a diverse culture to some extent, but it was so minuscule. Up until the 1950s, Britain was predominantly white. And that's not a judgment call. That's not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. That's a fact. These people are insane. And it's very toxic, because what they're doing is they're causing division. They're pitting white people against black people and saying, actually, this is black history. Britain is black. It's like, it's a lie.
Now, Rebecca, I know you were waiting to read the book.
Yes,
tonight.
I insisted. I said I'd only talk about it if I had a look at the book, because the article...
We meant to buy it for you.
I know, and I'm going to take it home with me for my daughter, if nobody else wants it.
I think you can have it.
But I sensed there wouldn't be people fighting for me in the green room. The way that it was reported cherry-picked the most controversial quotes from the book. Broadly speaking, it's about the fact that black people...
do. That's not
what good journalists do. It's been for the entire... OK, no, but throughout the majority of the book is about the fact that black people have existed in Britain throughout all of black culture. Throughout all
black
all
people
of history.
make Britain great. David Lammy, Professor David Olusogun, these are politically contested people.
Lewis Hamilton?
What about this one gets me?
What, the one in the niqab?
Yeah, the one in the niqab. Yeah, that's great.
Do they even know what black...
So this is like a leftist book. That's what it comes down to. And I'm inclined to believe that, yes, this is an interpretation of history through leftist ideology, far left ideology. That's what this is. And again, white liberals are probably going to be fine with this. White liberals are going to be fine with this because it furthers the agenda of pushing this ideology onto children. So people who care about fact, accuracy, true history, as so that no one is deceived, they're not going to be for this. They're not going to be for this. But people who are more concerned about their politics, who are more concerned about pushing, a socialist ideology, especially onto children, they're going to be all for this.
Means is absolutely
There are
ridiculous.
plenty of people on there who are not politically. Pat McGrath, who is a makeup artist. There are lots of people. There's a police person on there.
Well, I don't think I can forgive Lewis Hamilton's...
No, it's not a policeman, it's a police woman.
Vegan.
There was a police woman there. My point is, they are referring to a piece of research which came out of UCL and the Natural History Museum, which said that the Cheddar Gorge man, who was one of the earliest inhabitants, was black.
Yeah, and he had blue eyes as well.
The Tudors and the Stuarts did not look like this.
Some Tudors and some Stuarts did.
Calvin,
this is a book about black history, so it's got pictures of the black people.
Would you sanction a book like this that talked about Britons being only white? You wouldn't. It's nonsense. It's divisive.
Every textbook I read for my entire childhood, every single person was white. Every textbook published before about 2020 was just white people.
But yes, obviously, a lot of the textbooks when we in history class, I don't see many people who look like me. But that doesn't mean that we should now push history that is inaccurate. If I'm reading books about Nigeria, if I'm reading books about other parts of Africa, I've got plenty of history there. If I'm reading books about the Windrush, people from the Commonwealth, there's plenty of people who are going to look like me as pertaining to that history. So we don't need to fabricate things and push leftist ideology on children to make black people feel good about themselves. And I get the sense that this woman is kind of like, let them have their book. Let them have their book. If it makes them feel better, let them have it, even if it's inaccurate. That's the sense I'm getting from this woman. I'm sure she has, means well, but, I'm not for that. So UCL says here, UCL minds sequenced the DNA of Britain's oldest near-complete skeleton, Cheddar Man, and found he had blue-eyed and dark-skinned, sharing the appearance of other Western European hunter-gatherers. So that skeleton is believed to be 10,000 years old. And this is what they reconstructed. And this is what they believe the appearance to be. However, she's written a whole book based on this. So she's taken this is what it looks like to me, and rewritten history based on this one, DNA analysis. And we have an article written in 2020, so, at the height of the whole BLM, but it makes some interesting observations, written by Teresa Villiers, and this is a Conservative MP. Black people have lived in Britain since before the English came here. It is time our curriculum reflected that. It is not possible to understand modern Britain without an understanding of its past. That means teaching the nearly 2,000 years of black history in Britain in our schools. There were black people living in Britain before the English came here. Black and minority ethnic communities have roots in this country going back nearly 2,000 years, 2 millennia. Among the Roman legions guarding Hadrian's Wall in the 3rd century AD was a unit recruited in North Africa. In 210 AD, an African soldier serving in Carlisle went down in history as brave enough to make fun of the visiting emperor, Septimius Severus. In 1901, remains were discovered in York of a high-status woman from around 350 AD, born in Britain, but likely to have been of North African descent. A small black community appears in the account books of the court of King James IV at Holyrood shortly after 1500, and John Blanky was a black musician who performed for Henry VIII. We have Ignatius Sancho in 1772, the first black prose writer to be published in England, and John Kent, who became the first black police officer in 1837. And I want them to know about thousands of soldiers from Africa, the Caribbean, and India who fought and died for this country in 2 world wars. Nothing wrong with that. We can definitely talk about those contributions that, people from the Commonwealth have made. Don't know if it extends as far as to what the book we're talking about depicts, though. Don't know if it quite extends to that. It's based on an interpretation of history. It's not based on fact. That book is an interpretation. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves, and God willing, I will see you in the next video.